The rain wasn't just falling, it was staging a full-scale assault on downtown Austin. Water ricocheted off the sidewalks like beads on a drumhead, pooling into glistening mirrors that reflected a city too busy to care. Most people were rushing indoors, ducking under umbrellas or huddling in bus shelters. But Elon Musk wasn't most people. He had just wrapped up an unscheduled walk after a tech roundtable, something he did more often than most imagined. No entourage, no cameras, just him, the wet pavement, and the swirl of thoughts that never seemed to slow. He found a strange kind of clarity in motion, especially under the weight of rain and silence. It was then, just past midnight, that he noticed a figure hunched over near the edge of an empty parking lot. A van sat lopsided, its rear wheel completely flattened, the vehicle itself looking like it had seen war, and perhaps it had. Beside it stood a woman soaked through her hoodie and jeans, wrestling with a stubborn lug nut on a rusted tire iron. Elon slowed. Most people would keep walking, maybe toss a sympathetic glance. But the way she moved, methodical, focused, mechanical, struck a chord. It wasn't just a random struggle, it was a calculated attempt, like someone following an internal schematic only she could see. He stepped closer. "Need a hand?" The woman didn't flinch. She glanced up, and even in the downpour, Elon saw eyes that were sharper than her surroundings suggested, calm, analytical, scanning. Her knuckles were raw. Mud splattered her sleeves. Yet she still looked like someone who knew how things worked. "Can't break the seal on this lug nut," she said, straightening. "Aluminum thread is probably stripped. Previous owner must have over-tightened it with an impact gun." Elon blinked. Not what he expected. She tossed the wrench into the open van door with a clatter. "I'd take the grinder to it, but my inverter's fried. No juice." "Elon," he said, offering a hand before he realized how soaked they both were. "Elon Musk." She raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, and I'm Amelia Earhart." He chuckled. "I get that a lot." She wiped her hands on her jeans. "Sorry, just not used to billionaires showing up in parking lots offering roadside assistance." "What gave me away?" Elon asked deadpan. "The shoes," she replied. "Nobody wears leather Oxfords in a storm unless they're rich or deranged." Elon laughed again, genuinely this time. "Riley Morgan," she said at last. "Former engineer, former army, current vehicular squatter, I guess." She motioned to the van. It had duct tape over a side window and one of the doors tied shut with paracord. Faded stickers of old tech companies and military units adorned the bumper. "What kind of engineer?" Elon asked, now crouching to inspect the tire himself. It was worse than it looked. "Mechanical and electrical," she answered. "Worked contracts for the Department of Defense. Systems integration mostly." Then the world fell apart. He glanced at her. "How so?" "Long story," Riley replied. "The short version ends in divorce, medical debt, and a bank account that couldn't survive a flat tire, let alone life." Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. "You know," she added, watching him dig a multi-tool from his coat pocket, "most guys in your tax bracket wouldn't stop to help someone like me. They'd call security." "I'm not most guys," Elon said. "No," she agreed, eyes narrowing as if trying to see through him. "You're not." The rain was easing now, shifting from violent downpour to something gentler, almost rhythmic. Elon stood again, brushing water from his jacket. "I can get you a tow if you want." "Thanks, but no," Riley said. "AAA cut me off 3 breakdowns ago." He hesitated. "Look," she said, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm not trying to guilt you into anything. I've been managing, mostly, but thanks for stopping." Then she reached inside the van and pulled out a notebook, a weather-worn, duct-taped composition book with pages so used they curled at the edges. She flipped it open and held it toward him. Diagrams, handwritten equations, sketches of circuitry and propulsion systems. It looked like a cross between an engineering textbook and the diary of a genius with no access to a whiteboard. "What is this?" Elon asked, taking the notebook carefully. "Stuff I've been working on," she said. "Theories, battery load balancing concepts, heat dispersion in low-atmosphere drones. It's nothing really." But it wasn't nothing. Not to Elon. He flipped through a few pages. The notation was sharp, elegant even. These weren't idle doodles. They were solutions in search of resources. "Do you do this often?" he asked. "Only when I can't sleep," she said. "So most nights." He closed the notebook. "You hungry?" Riley looked confused. "What?" "There's a diner across the street," he said, pointing. A red neon sign buzzed through the rain. "The Lone Fork." "Don't worry, it's not a trap," he added with a smile. Riley hesitated. Her pride wrestled with her hunger for exactly 3 seconds before she nodded. "Okay, but I'm not changing out of these clothes." "You'll fit right in." Together, they crossed the street under a flickering street lamp. Elon held the door open as the warm light and smell of bacon and coffee spilled out. The rain continued behind them, softer now, like the world had paused to watch something rare begin. Riley didn't know it yet, but that broken lug nut had just steered her life into a new orbit. And Elon, for all his algorithms and rockets and plans, had just found a spark he hadn't realized he was missing. The Lone Fork Diner was the kind of place that had been forgotten by time, but remembered by truckers. Vinyl booths worn smooth from decades of elbows and spilled coffee. A jukebox in the corner still blinked with dusty lights, its buttons sticky from syrupy fingers and nostalgia. The smell inside was a mix of burnt toast, overworked bacon grease, and something vaguely floral, probably the waitress's perfume. In the middle of it all, beneath a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a tired mosquito, sat Elon Musk and Riley Morgan, 2 worlds orbiting the same steaming mugs of coffee. Riley cupped her hands around the chipped porcelain, letting the warmth settle into her bones. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the absurdity of it all. Hours ago, she had been soaked and alone in a dark parking lot. Now, she was sitting across from the richest man in the world, who had not only helped her with a tire, but had insisted on hearing her story. Elon had pushed the notebook across the table and was now studying its pages like they were blueprints for something sacred. "This isn't just tinkering," he said finally. "You've mapped out a whole system here. Thermal stability control, dynamic balancing protocols. This isn't beginner-level theory." Riley took a sip of coffee, avoiding his eyes. "I spent years around this stuff. When you've got nowhere to go at night, you either lose your mind or focus it. Libraries were open, warm, and had electrical outlets. So I read, studied, tried to keep my brain busy while the rest of my life fell apart." He flipped another page. The handwriting was neat, purposeful. Diagrams of modular battery units stretched across the margins, annotated in pencil, smudged in places, but brilliant in their structure. "This section here, you're suggesting a semi-liquid cooling system integrated into the housing wall itself." "Yeah," she nodded. "Most designs separate the casing from the thermal management. I thought, why not merge them? Let the enclosure serve double duty. Cut down on material costs and weight." Elon whistled softly. "That's not only smart, it's scalable." She shrugged. "Ideas are cheap. It's execution that costs." Elon leaned back in the booth, watching her over the rim of his mug. "Where'd you learn this?" "Part military, part private sector. I was a systems engineer for a defense contractor in Virginia. Mostly drone applications, battery optimization, lightweight armor integration. After my deployment, they liked that I could speak both mechanical and electrical languages." "What happened?" Her face tightened just for a second. "Life. My partner got sick. The bills piled up. I took leave, then a demotion, then I quit to become a full-time caregiver. He passed away 18 months later. I came back to nothing." Elon didn't interrupt. He just listened, like the din of the diner had quieted to hear her speak. "I figured I'd rebuild," she continued. "Started freelancing, then my mother died. The last anchor I had. Depression, eviction, and here we are, living in a van held together with duct tape and hope." The waitress, April, her name tag declared, refilled their coffees and offered a slice of pie on the house. Riley declined. Elon didn't. "So you kept designing?" he asked after she left. "It was the only thing I still knew how to do," Riley said. Ideas don't care about your address. Homelessness didn't make me less of an engineer. It just made me invisible. Elon ran a hand through his rain-damp hair. You're not invisible now. She snorted lightly. Until I walk back out into the world. People don't want to see someone like me. I'm an inconvenience in their periphery. You're a talent hiding in plain sight, he said. That's what matters. For a long moment, they just sat there, the silence between them filled only with the hum of fluorescent lights and the clink of utensils on ceramic. Elon's mind was racing. He had spent years seeking out brilliance, recruiting top-tier talent from MIT, Caltech, and every think tank between. But sitting here, in a peeling red booth across from a woman who had coded her thoughts into a weathered notebook, he felt like he had discovered something rare. Not just intelligence, grit, resilience, a mind forged under pressure, not privilege. Riley, he said slowly, I want to introduce you to someone. Her eyes flicked up, suspicious, cautious. Who? A friend of mine at Tesla, he replied. Her name's Kamira Lee. She runs one of our advanced battery labs in Nevada. She's not easily impressed, but she's fair. If you're open to it, I'd like her to review your work. No promises, no pressure, just a conversation. Riley looked stunned. Her fingers tightened on the mug. Are you serious? Completely. I don't have a degree anymore, she said quietly. I don't even have an address. Neither of those things disqualify good ideas, Elon said. Trust me, I've had my fair share of crazy-sounding concepts that worked out. Mars colonization, neural interfaces. People laughed until they stopped laughing. She studied his face, searching for signs of charity, pity, or some other empty gesture. She found none. Just a calm, analytical sincerity, the kind she hadn't encountered in years. What would I even say to her, she asked. Just show her the notebook, he said. That's more than enough. Riley looked down at the worn cover, the edges curled and damp from years of weather and worry. That book had traveled with her through shelters, benches, parking garages, and library tables. It had been her lifeline when she had none. And now it might be her bridge. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Say yes, Elon replied. Everything else can come after. Riley took a breath, so deep it trembled on the way out. Okay, she said. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city's glow shimmered on the wet pavement like gold on glass, and for the first time in a long time, Riley Morgan didn't feel stuck in the storm. She felt invited. And Elon Musk, sipping lukewarm coffee in a diner booth in Austin, smiled as if he'd just seen the first light of something new. A voltage, a frequency, a signal in the dark finally reaching home. The Tesla Gigafactory in Sparks, Nevada rose like a modern colossus from the dusty plains, its sleek silver panels gleaming under the early morning sun. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, making the angular structure look like a space station that had crash-landed into a barren future. For Riley Morgan, just stepping inside was like walking into a parallel universe. Her boots, worn and mismatched, tapped cautiously across the polished floors of the Tesla lobby. Security had cleared her with a temporary badge clipped awkwardly to her military-style jacket. The same jacket she'd worn in a rainback in Austin. Elon had offered to buy her new clothes, even a plane ticket in first class. She'd politely declined both. The van was still her home for now. Her integrity, like her notebook, was weathered but intact. A young assistant led her down a long corridor of glass and brushed steel, the walls humming faintly with the whisper of engineering ambition. Employees passed by with tablets in hand, most too busy to notice her. But those who did paused, some curious, some confused. She didn't fit the mold, and she knew it. Yet something about being here didn't intimidate her. It energized her. They stopped at a wide conference room with transparent glass walls. Inside stood Dr. Alex Kotler, head of battery engineering for Tesla, a legend in the world Riley used to belong to. He had built his reputation not just on intelligence, but on his refusal to let arrogance replace curiosity. Alex looked up from a digital tablet and smiled as Riley entered. He was in his 40s with tousled, gray-streaked hair and round glasses that gave him the air of a scientist who forgot to sleep, often. His lab coat was unbuttoned over faded jeans and a Tesla t-shirt which sported a small solder burn near the hem. "Riley Morgan," he said, stepping forward with a handshake both firm and warm. "I've been looking forward to this." "Likewise, Dr. Kotler," she replied, gripping his hand with practice control. "Please," he said, gesturing to the table, "call me Alex. Titles are for egos, not engineers." The table between them was a wide slab of glass, digitally interactive, but today it was clear and simple. Nothing but a few mugs of coffee and Riley's notebook, now dried but still clearly worn by time and travel. She placed it gently in front of him, like a sacred text. "I've been told this is worth a look," Alex said, flipping it open. "Elon rarely makes recommendations. When he does, I listen." As Alex began reading, Riley sat back with measured patience. She watched his face, the small twitches of his brow, the occasional tilt of his head. She had learned to read people in shelters, in waiting rooms, in VA offices, learned how to watch for signs of dismissal, of boredom, of being written off. But none of those signs showed up here. In fact, after 5 minutes, Alex stopped reading and looked up. "You came up with this on your own?" She nodded. "Most of it in libraries. Some in the van. Bits and pieces on diner napkins." He turned the notebook slightly. "This cooling loop design, it's integrated into the structure of the cell enclosure?" "Yes," she said. "It's not just about heat management. It's about structural efficiency. Why build a cage around your solution when the cage is your solution?" Alex blinked. That was the kind of statement that didn't just come from someone smart. It came from someone obsessed in the best way possible. "And this electrode configuration, did you simulate it?" "I don't have access to proper tools anymore," Riley admitted. "I did what I could with open-source modeling libraries at the university labs, but mostly it's theoretical." "Well," he said slowly, "your theory may outperform half the prototypes we're actively testing." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. "I'm not blowing smoke," Alex continued. "Your hybrid layering approach, using variable density distribution based on active thermal gradients, it's extremely clever. The math checks out, and more importantly, it feels right." He turned a few more pages, his fingers trailing across the margins like a pianist finding a melody. "I'm guessing you used lithium iron phosphate as your base chemistry?" he asked. "For stability and cost efficiency," she said. "But I've been thinking about solid-state alternatives for Phase 2, if Phase 1 ever happens." Alex let out a low whistle. "This," he said, "isn't just a cool concept. This could be disruptive." She didn't smile. Not yet. She'd heard that word before in pitch rooms and rejection letters. Disruptive was what they called something when they weren't sure if it was brilliant or terrifying. "I'm just a homeless veteran with a notebook," she said softly. "I'm not sure how to turn this into anything." Alex closed the notebook and slid it gently across the table. "No, you're an engineer who's been underestimated. That ends now." There was a pause, an unspoken moment where potential hung in the air like static. "We can prototype this," he said. "We'll need to simulate first, obviously. Run it through our systems. But if the numbers hold..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "But there's a catch," she said. "Isn't there always a catch?" Alex nodded, but not in the way she expected. "The catch is, you'd have to come work with us. Not as charity, as a contributor. That means joining a team, getting into the weeds, fighting for your ideas." "I've been fighting for them alone for years," Riley said. "Working with people sounds like a dream." Alex smiled. "Then let's wake it up." As they stood, Riley's hands hesitated over her notebook, but instead of picking it up, she pushed it toward him. "Keep it," she said. "I've got it memorized anyway." Alex looked at her, then nodded solemnly. "Then let's build it right." They stepped out of the glass-walled room into the vibrant hum of the Tesla facility. Engineers passed them with nods, curiosity buzzing beneath their polite smiles. Riley didn't know where she would sleep tonight, but for the first time in years, she knew why she was waking up tomorrow. And just like that, her world, once as small as a van, had begun to expand. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed softly above the Tesla engineering floor as Elon Musk stepped out of the boardroom and loosened his collar. The meeting had run long, too many numbers, too few ideas, but it was necessary. Shareholders liked projections. He preferred progress. As he walked toward the labs, a familiar sight caught his eye through the long corridor window. Dr. Alex Kotler pacing with energy rarely seen outside prototype testing. "Good news travels fast," Elon said as he pushed the door open. Alex looked up, a glint in her eye, and Riley's notebook clutched in one hand like it was the Rosetta Stone. "I don't say this lightly," Alex began, "but this thing could shift the way we think about modular energy storage." Elon raised a brow. "That much?" Alex nodded, flipping to one of the pages. "Her design enables about 30% more energy density, and if we implement her dynamic heat regulation model correctly, we're looking at significantly faster charge cycles with lower thermal strain." She handed Elon the notebook. He scanned the page quickly, then slower, brow furrowing with interest. "She built this without a lab." "Libraries, public terminals, scratch paper," Alex replied. "She's a natural, obsessive in the right way. Like the best of us, but with none of the ego." Elon closed the notebook slowly. "Where is she now?" "She's still in the observation lounge," Alex said. "Said she needed a moment." Moments later, Elon found Riley staring out at the desert from a wide window. The sun was slipping low behind the hills, casting the floor in a molten orange glow. She stood with her arms crossed, the notebook absent for the first time since they'd met. It was as if she'd left a piece of herself behind in that glass room and wasn't quite sure what came next. "You look like you just got off a roller coaster," Elon said gently. Riley smiled faintly. "More like I wasn't tall enough to ride, but they let me on anyway." He chuckled. "I just spoke with Alex. She's blown away. So am I." Riley glanced over, unsure if she should respond with gratitude or disbelief. "I know this is a lot," he continued, "but I'd like to make you an offer." Her body tensed, barely perceptible but real. Offers were usually traps in disguise, or so life had taught her. "You'd come on board as a consultant for 3 months. Paid, of course," he said, watching her carefully. "No red tape. You'd have access to our lab's resources, a small team, if you want one. You'd report directly to Alex. She'll fight for your ideas." Riley blinked. "That sounds unreal." "It gets more real," he said. "We'll also provide you with a furnished apartment near our Austin facility, walking distance. You'd have your own space. No van, no late-night library closures." She didn't say anything for a long time. Her mind raced through every defense mechanism she'd built in the past 5 years. This kind of offer was too good, too clean, too generous. "Why?" she finally asked quietly. "Why me?" Elon exhaled. "Because you're brilliant. And because brilliance doesn't always wear a lab coat or hold a Stanford degree. Sometimes it's tucked inside a duct-tape notebook and held together by stubborn hope." Riley felt her throat tighten. She turned back to the window, blinking away the emotion that threatened to surface. "I haven't slept in a real bed in months," she said quietly. "I don't even know if I remember how to be normal." "You don't have to be normal," Elon replied. "You just have to be you." Riley turned to him. "And if I fail?" "Then you'll fail trying something that mattered," he said. "And we'll both learn something." She studied his face, the way he said "we" instead of "you." It mattered more than he knew. "I don't want charity," she said. "This isn't charity," he replied. "It's collaboration." She hesitated. 1,000 doubts clawed at her ribs. But louder than them all was the tiny flicker of a voice she hadn't heard in a long time, one that whispered maybe. "I'll need time to adjust," she said. "Of course. And coffee. A lot of coffee." He grinned. "That we can guarantee." Riley finally extended her hand. It was still rough from the tire wrench in Austin. Elon shook it without hesitation. Later that evening, Back at the modest hotel Tesla had arranged for her near the factory, Riley sat at the small desk and stared at the key in her hand, the key to her soon-to-be apartment. Her suitcase was still just a military duffel, her boots still muddy, but something inside her felt unmistakably different. The van was parked a few miles away in a Walmart lot, but she no longer saw it as her only shelter. It was now just part of the past. She opened her laptop, one provided by Tesla that morning, and clicked into a virtual workspace Alex had set up. There were already simulations running, baseline comparisons, heat maps. A digital copy of her entire notebook had been uploaded and enhanced. The message at the top read, "Welcome to the team, Riley. Let's build something beautiful." Alex. She leaned back in the chair and exhaled. Not in fear, not in exhaustion, but in something new, possibility. Outside, the city buzzed softly in the distance. Not a storm, not a siren, just life. And for the first time in a long time, Riley Morgan wasn't surviving it. She was stepping into it. The first morning in her new apartment was oddly disorienting for Riley Morgan. She had expected relief, maybe even a touch of joy, but what she felt was something more fragile, disbelief. The room was quiet in a way that felt unnatural to someone who'd spent so long sleeping with one ear open. No distant freeway hum, no murmurs of nearby strangers or the clatter of shopping carts pushed by early morning scavengers in parking lots. Just the low, almost meditative hiss of a high-efficiency air vent and the soft ticking of an unfamiliar kitchen clock. Her apartment was modest but beautiful, tucked into a quiet corner complex near the Tesla facility. White walls, warm oak floors, brand new appliances. The fridge was full, fully stocked by Tesla's onboarding team with everything from fresh produce to indulgent snacks she hadn't tasted in years. In the bathroom, she turned on the faucet and stared for a moment as hot water cascaded freely from a showerhead, steaming the mirror within seconds. She stood under that stream longer than she meant to, not out of necessity, but because she could. Clean towels, fresh clothes, real sheets on a real bed. It was amazing how quickly those small luxuries became unfamiliar languages to her. Each one was a new dialect of dignity she had to relearn. At the facility, her days started early, which suited her just fine. The Tesla battery lab was a controlled chaos of high-speed problem-solving. White bars were filled and erased within hours, digital models updated by the minute, and people seemed to operate with an electric kind of urgency. Riley entered cautiously on her first day, unsure how she'd be received. But to her surprise, Alex Kodler had already prepped the team. "She's not here to shadow," Alex told them. "She's here to contribute." And contribute she did. While Riley wasn't yet fluent with Tesla's proprietary modeling software, her analytical mind was unmistakably sharp. She asked questions no one else was asking, ones that unearthed blind spots and forced even senior engineers to reevaluate long-held assumptions. Her unique designs often came from reverse engineering problems in ways the team hadn't considered. She treated materials like characters in a story, each with their own needs, tolerances, and temperaments. During one afternoon session, as the team debated heat loss in stacked cell configurations, Riley sat quietly sketching in the corner. When Alex glanced over, she was drawing a nested spiral cooling loop, something both elegant and aggressive. When she finally shared it, the room went silent. The intern nearest her whispered, "It's like Gaudi meets Nikola Tesla." But not every day was easy. Despite the apartment, the hot showers, the smiles in the hallway, her trauma didn't vanish. It came in waves. Sometimes it was triggered by loud mechanical noises in the lab. Other times by sudden closeness in crowded break rooms. There were moments when she would freeze mid-sentence, her eyes losing focus, her breath shallow. Once during a design presentation, a ceiling vent rattled in a way that made her flinch hard enough to drop her stylus. But this time, there were people who noticed and cared. Alex gently redirected the meeting without making a scene. Afterward, she walked Riley to the rooftop terrace and just stood with her, watching the desert roll under the afternoon sun. "No one here expects perfection," she said softly. "We're not machines." Riley nodded, the tightness in her chest slowly unwinding. Tesla, to her surprise, had robust mental health support. Within a week, she had her first appointment with a therapist who specialized in trauma and reintegration. The office was quiet, the furniture soft, and there were no clocks ticking too loudly on the walls. In those sessions, Riley didn't talk about batteries. She talked about nights in shelters where strangers screamed in their sleep, about the guilt of surviving while others didn't, about the mental gymnastics required to keep hope alive when society decided you no longer belonged. Each session peeled away a layer, not to expose weakness, but to reclaim strength. Back at the lab, she began to develop small rituals. Morning coffee with Julia, a young thermal engineer with a fascination for vintage calculators. Lunch breaks on the back-loading dock with Marcus, a soft-spoken chemist who reminded her of her brother. Afternoons sketching with Alex's team in the collaboration bay, sometimes talking, sometimes not. No one asked her to change who she was. They just welcomed her as she was. Late one night, long after most of the team had gone home, Riley sat alone in the simulation room. Her project files glowed on the screen, dozens of them now. Beside her was a worn legal pad, its pages filled with the same handwriting from her old notebook, but cleaner now, more confident. On the far wall, someone had pinned up one of her cooling designs, framing it like art. She looked around and whispered aloud, "This is real, isn't it?" And it was. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't temporary. It was a beginning. The buzz around the battery lab had reached a frequency Riley could almost feel in her bones. Engineers whispered about it in corridors, developers crowded around data feeds, and even janitors paused by the testing bay monitors a little longer than usual. The quiet intensity of anticipation hung thick in the air. It was road test day. The prototype, codenamed Falcon Red, was outfitted with Riley's redesigned battery system, a hybrid architecture she'd once scribbled on the back of a crumpled bus schedule during a cold night at a shelter in San Antonio. Now that sketch had become the core of an energy-dense, thermally balanced unit tucked neatly inside the belly of a sleek red Model S. The testing crew assembled at Tesla's proving grounds just after dawn. Riley stood beside Dr. Alex Kotler, wearing a lightweight Tesla windbreaker over her usual jeans and boots. She still looked like herself, unpolished but grounded, but there was something different in the way she carried her shoulders now. Less armor, more purpose. Technicians buzzed around the car, calibrating telemetry equipment, aligning thermal sensors, triple-checking interface readings. Elon Musk arrived shortly after, quietly, no fanfare. He gave Riley a simple nod and a slight smile. He wasn't the type to overstate a moment. He didn't have to. The significance was already understood. Riley walked over to the test driver, a tall woman with braided hair and a sharp focus named Amanda. "No pressure," Riley said with a nervous smirk, "but if this thing catches fire, my therapy bills are going to spike." Amanda laughed. "If it catches fire, I'll blame the upholstery." The Model S accelerated smoothly off the line, disappearing around the track's first curve. For 30 silent seconds, the room held its collective breath. Then the data started flowing in. Riley's eyes darted between heat maps, voltage graphs, and efficiency readouts. Her design wasn't just performing, it was outperforming every benchmark. Range extension, 32% increase. Charge rate, 26% faster. Heat dispersion, 40% improvement under high load. And no irregularities, no spikes, no system stress, just flow. Alex let out a low, reverent whistle. It's like watching jazz. Even Elon stepped closer, studying the data stream with a look of genuine surprise. "She's got something here," he murmured, half to himself. "She really does." When Amanda returned, the Model S rolled to stop with barely a whisper. "She drives like a dream," the test driver said, pulling off her helmet. "Cool as ice, even in the tight turns. You've got something magic under the hood." Riley didn't say anything. Her throat tightened with the pressure of disbelief giving way to triumph. Back inside, The meeting that followed was brief and to the point. Elon, pacing near the front of the conference room, addressed the core engineering team. "We've been chasing incremental improvements for years," he said. "Today we just made a leap. Riley's system is scalable, elegant, efficient. It's going into the next-gen powertrain initiative, effective immediately." Then he turned to her. "We're going to need you more involved, Riley. I want you leading integration with Alex." She blinked. "Lead? You've earned it." The room applauded, genuinely, without obligation. Riley felt her face grow warm. For so long, she had been invisible, surviving on scraps of dignity. Now, she was the person others looked toward when the future was uncertain. Over the next few weeks, her role transformed. No longer just a contributor, she became a central voice in daily briefings and cross-department meetings. She spoke on panels, gave internal lectures, and slowly, her name began circulating within Tesla's wider network, not as a novelty, but as a thought leader. That's when she met Diego. He was 24, recently hired, and brilliant, but painfully reserved. Diego rarely spoke during team huddles, always second-guessed his input, and worked late into the night rechecking things that didn't need checking. Riley recognized the symptoms immediately, not of incompetence, but of someone crushed by the fear of being seen as a fraud. She cornered him one afternoon near the back workstations. "You're too quiet for someone whose logic trees are this clean," she said, holding up one of his circuit simulations. Diego turned red. "I'm just trying not to step on toes." "Step," she said. "That's how people notice you have feet." He blinked, unsure how to respond. "Come by my desk tomorrow," she added. "I want you to walk me through your subcell thermal routing idea." "You've seen that." "I don't miss much." He showed up the next morning with 2 energy drinks, 3 different models, and a stack of printed equations, most of which were unnecessary, but showed how seriously he'd taken her invitation. They spent 3 hours together dissecting the model. She didn't just nod politely. She asked questions, challenged assumptions, and pushed him to defend his logic. By the end of it, Diego looked like someone who'd just run a marathon, but there was a new light in his eyes. "You're good," she said, "and you're going to get better. I'll help." After that, Diego's confidence began to bloom. Slowly but steadily, he asked more questions in meetings, made suggestions out loud. When he presented a minor design update 2 weeks later, he referenced Riley's mentoring without hesitation. She'd become, without meaning to, a kind of bridge, forged in fire, now guiding others across. One evening, as the team was closing up, Diego lingered by the door. "You know," he said, "I read about your story. Online. The notebook. The van. Everything." Riley didn't flinch. "Yeah." He nodded. "Just wanted to say, thanks. For not giving up. Makes it easier for the rest of us not to." She didn't respond right away. Just offered him a nod. Then she turned back toward the lab, where tomorrow's challenges already awaited. Because now, it wasn't just about proving herself. It was about building something batteries, careers, people, that lasted longer than the storms they'd survived. Riley Morgan hadn't decorated much yet. Her new apartment, this one fully hers, no Tesla arrangement, no corporate lease, was quiet and sunlit, perched on the second floor of a modest building not far from Lady Bird Lake. A bookshelf leaned half-filled against one wall, and a potted succulent sat on the windowsill, still alive somehow despite her best efforts. The living room was sparse but peaceful. There were no cardboard boxes anymore, only small signs of permanence, her name on the lease, a dog-eared library card on the fridge, and a coffee mug with a chipped rim she refused to throw away. But nothing in that quiet apartment made her heart pound quite like the name on her phone screen that morning. Gabriel, her son. It had been almost 6 years since they'd last spoken. He was 28 now, living in Seattle, a software developer for some AI firm she'd never heard of, but immediately Googled after their first call. When they spoke, the words were stiff, like old wires flexing after too long in the cold. But there was no anger in his voice, just the guarded caution of someone who'd been burned and still held the matchbook. Now they were meeting for lunch. A small cafe near the river, one she had suggested after reading it had good reviews and not too much noise. She'd walk there early to calm her nerves, wearing a dark gray blouse and the only pair of flats she owned that didn't scream work shoes. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her notebook left at home. Today wasn't about circuits or cooling loops. Today was about something far more delicate, forgiveness. She sat at a window table, sipping water with lemon when he walked in. Gabriel had her eyes. That was the first thing she noticed. Sharp, contemplative. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader, his hair shorter, clothes cropped and well kept. He wore a button-down over jeans, the kind of outfit that said, "I want to look nice, but I don't want to try too hard." He spotted her and gave a small wave. "Hi, Mom," he said, and for a second she forgot how to breathe. "Hi, Gabe," she said, standing a bit too quickly. You look great." "You too," he replied, and they both smiled, a little awkwardly, like strangers who recognized each other from old photographs. They sat. The waiter brought menus, but neither of them opened them for a while. "How was the flight?" she asked. "Easy," he said. "Got bumped to first class. Guess that's the universe making up for the layovers." She chuckled. "Still bad with airports." "Always." That broke the tension. Slowly, their conversation began to take shape. Not the heavy stuff, not yet. They talked about his work, about the absurdity of programming language updates, about Austin's weather versus Seattle's fog. He asked about Tesla carefully, but with real interest. "I saw the test results," Gabriel said. "Your battery system, it's all over the industry blogs." Riley shrugged, eyes low. "It's a team effort." "Still," he said, "that's incredible. You built all that after everything." She hesitated. "You mean after I disappeared?" He didn't flinch. "I didn't say that." "But it's true," she said, voice softer now. "I did. I was ashamed. After your father passed, and then the house. I didn't know how to be a parent and a person falling apart. So I chose silence. I didn't want you to see me broken." Gabriel looked down, stirring his iced tea with a straw. "I was angry. For a while. But mostly I just missed you." "I missed you too," she whispered. A long silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like a river being bridged, stone by stone. "You don't owe me an apology," Gabriel said finally. "What you went through, what you survived, that's more than I can understand. And I'm proud of you. I really am." Riley's lips parted slightly, as if those words had knocked the wind from her. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than I can explain." He smiled, this time more openly. "I've been telling my partner about you. Liam's really excited to meet you." Her eyebrows lifted. "Liam?" "Yeah," he said with a small laugh. "We've been together 3 years now. He's kind of the extrovert to my introvert. Funny, smart, amazing cook. I'd love to meet him." "Well," Gabriel said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "you might get your chance sooner than you think." He slid a wedding invitation across the table. It was clean and minimal, with a soft navy border and elegant lettering. "We're getting married in 2 months. Seattle. Small ceremony, mostly friends and a few family." Riley touched the envelope delicately. "You want me to come?" "I want you there," he said. "Not just as a guest. As my mom." Her vision blurred for a second. She blinked rapidly and laughed to keep from crying. "Do I have to give a speech?" she asked. "Only if it includes at least one embarrassing childhood story." "Oh, I have plenty of those." They laughed together then, genuine, unguarded laughter. It cracked something open inside her that had been sealed shut for years. They eventually ordered lunch, sandwiches, soup, nothing fancy, but it tasted like a banquet. When they hugged goodbye outside, she held on a little longer than necessary. And he didn't let go first. Back at her apartment, Riley set the invitation on her coffee table and sat down slowly beside it. The sun poured in through the window, warming the floor at her feet. A silence filled the space, but this time it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. She looked around at the apartment, the bookshelf, the coffee mug, the plant that somehow lived. And now a future. One not just charged by lithium or design, but by love rediscovered. The room pulsed with polite applause as Riley stepped down from the stage. She had just wrapped up a keynote at Tesla's annual innovation showcase in Austin, and for once, the spotlight hadn't made her flinch. Dressed in a tailored black jacket and a subtle silver necklace gifted by Alex, she had spoken confidently about the Morgan cell, a battery design now powering Tesla's next generation of vehicles. Her name was officially etched into Tesla's legacy, not as a footnote, but as a headline. As she descended into the crowd, a flurry of journalists, engineers, and executives surged toward her, congratulating her on the breakthrough. Her heart buzzed with a surreal sense of belonging. She could see Elon chatting with investors near the far end of the reception hall, flanked by glowing LED displays and interactive demos showing heat dispersal rates and range performance graphs for the Morgan cell. It should have been a perfect evening, until a tall, suited man approached her with the calm, deliberate air of someone used to commanding rooms without raising his voice. "Ms. Morgan," he said, extending a hand. "Senator Bradley Kingston, from the Senate Armed Services Committee." His voice was low and smooth, with the edge of a practiced smile. Riley took his hand out of reflex, but her eyes sharpened immediately. "Senator," she replied, "I wasn't expecting to meet anyone from your office tonight." "I'm not here officially," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Just curious." He held a crystal tumbler with something amber inside, probably scotch, judging by the scent. The kind of man who never looked like he was sweating, even in Texas heat. "I caught your talk. Impressive. Elegant design. Clean execution." "Thank you," she said carefully. "Especially fascinating," he continued, "how your energy routing algorithm mirrors something we used to study in a classified program called Falcon Crest." The name hit her like an echo from a life she'd tried to forget. Her back stiffened. That program was buried a decade ago. Scrapped. Redacted. "So they say," Kingston murmured, tilting his glass gently. "But some of us remember. You were part of it, weren't you? Systems optimization. Experimental power cells for unmanned applications." Riley glanced around. The press had moved on. No one was watching. "I was a junior engineer under contract," she said flatly. "The work was compartmentalized. I never had access to final prototypes." "But you were there," Kingston said, leaning in just enough that she could smell the sharp burn of his drink. "And you never forgot the math." She took a step back, squaring her shoulders. The Morgan cell is original work. Years of development, tested by independent review, based on open academic principles. Kingston smiled without warmth. "Of course. I'm sure the lawyers will agree." Riley's jaw clenched. "Is that a threat?" He chuckled softly. No. Just a reminder that some ideas come with shadows. And those shadows tend to stretch, especially when spotlight gets too bright." He glanced over at the display, showing a 3D render of her design cycling through a charge-to-discharge simulation. "You've done well, Ms. Morgan. You've risen farther than anyone expected. Just be mindful of what you're standing on." Then, just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into a cluster of industry executives with a predator's ease, his glass still half full. Riley stood frozen. The room felt colder. No one around her noticed. They smiled, laughed, sipped champagne, talked about EV adoption rates and lithium sourcing. But to her, everything had shifted by a degree. Falcon Crest. The name hadn't passed her lips in years. It was the first major project she'd worked on after her return from Afghanistan, deep in a DC basement of a defense contractor's facility, long days of simulated stress tests and heat mapping for energy-dense, ultra-discrete power units. The prototypes were never fully realized. The funding vanished in a change of administration. The files were archived, the team scattered, and Riley had been let go during a wave of post-budget cuts. But she hadn't forgotten the patterns, the structures, the things that never made it to the patent office. Not because she stole them, but because they had haunted her. She had wrestled with those unsolved problems for years, through homelessness, through nights in the van on napkins in notebooks, in half-dreams on library desks. And maybe, just maybe, some of the bones of those old blueprints had made it into the Morgan cell. Not as theft, as evolution. Still, the senator's words scratched at the edge of her composure. Later that night, back in her apartment, she sat on the floor beside the coffee table, her laptop open to a secure cloud archive. She pulled up old sketches, some hand-drawn, some scanned from the weather notebook, others rebuilt from memory during sleepless nights. She compared them to the declassified remnants of Falcon Crest that had quietly leaked years ago on obscure defense blogs and FOIA repositories. There were similarities, yes, but there were also divergences, critical ones. Her cell had a modular thermal matrix Falcon Crest never achieved. Her charge distribution model used learning heuristics absent from any of the original specs. Still, the core problem was the same: how to push energy density past what traditional systems could handle without collapse. She stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a metronome of doubt. Then her phone buzzed. It was a text from Alex. "Phenomenal talk today. You nailed it. Team's proud of you. Drinks tomorrow." Riley didn't answer right away. She closed the laptop gently and leaned back against the couch. The Morgan cell wasn't a secret. It was her legacy. But now, she had to wonder, was she building a future or unearthing a ghost? Riley didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the senator's voice looping through her mind like a glitch in an otherwise flawless system. The words Falcon Crest echoed louder than they should have. Not because she was guilty, but because somewhere in the folds of her memory, buried beneath the blueprints and scar tissue, she feared a grain of truth. By morning, she knew she couldn't carry the weight of it alone. She arrived early at the Tesla campus, bypassing the main floor and heading straight to Alex Kodler's office. The door was ajar, soft jazz playing from a corner speaker. Alex sat behind her desk in her signature half-button lab coat, hair pulled back in a loose bun, reading simulation data on a tablet. She looked up, immediately noticing the tension in Riley's shoulders. "You look like you slept in a data center." "Close," Riley muttered, stepping in. "Can we talk privately?" Alex put the tablet down. "Of course." Riley closed the door behind her and sat across the desk, her fingers tightening around the armrest. "There's something I need to tell you, and Elon needs to hear it too." Minutes later, they were in one of the smaller, soundproof executive conference rooms. Elon joined without delay, wearing his usual expression of half-interest that quickly sharpened into focus when he sensed something real. Riley sat with her back straight, hands folded in front of her, like she was back in military debriefing. "I had an encounter last night at the showcase," she began, "with Senator Bradley Kingston." That got Elon's attention. What did he want? "To remind me that ideas have shadows," she said. "He mentioned a classified project I worked on years ago, Falcon Crest. It was defunded and buried, but he thinks some of its research resembles what I've done with the Morgan cell." Alex's brows furrowed. Was there overlap? "Not directly," Riley said, "but some of the concepts, energy routing, heat dissipation, are related. I developed my work independently, but I can't deny the mental seeds were planted years ago." Elon leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Were you under a non-disclosure agreement?" "Yes, but that NDA expired when the project was terminated. The IP never went anywhere. It was never patented or published. The Pentagon shelved the whole thing." Alex shot him a glance. "We should bring in legal." "I already anticipated that," Riley said. "I've documented everything, timeline, drafts, sources, where the final design diverges from any work I did back then. But I needed you both to hear it from me." Elon didn't speak right away. He had that distant look he wore when mentally running simulations in his head. Then he nodded. "Thank you for bringing this to us directly." They summoned Tesla's internal legal counsel that afternoon. Two lawyers, both sharp and composed, reviewed Riley's disclosures meticulously. She handed over annotated design files, timestamps, her original notebook scans, and even email records from her former employer showing her contract termination date. They combed through every detail for hours, the tension in the room thick as carbon fiber. In the end, Their conclusion was clear and measured. "There's no legal liability here," one of the attorneys said, adjusting her glasses. The Falcon Crest project was decommissioned and classified as non-advancing research. It never resulted in a patented or protected product. Furthermore, Ms. Morgan's development of the Morgan cell clearly evolved outside of any privileged context. The second attorney added, "However, from a PR standpoint, we recommend you avoid discussing Falcon Crest in public settings. If the media catches wind, it'll become a distraction. Worse, it could be twisted into something it's not." Riley nodded. She had expected as much. When the room cleared, only Elon, Alex, and Riley remained. The weight of the conversation hung between them like solder, smoke in a ventilated lab. "I trust you," Elon said finally. "This project isn't just tech, it's reputation. You've proven your integrity. Don't let that man make you doubt it." Alex nodded. "We stand with you, Riley. And if Kingston or anyone else tries to stir the pot again, we go public with our side of the story first." "I'm not afraid of him," Riley said. "I'm just tired of ghosts." Elon's voice softened. "Then maybe it's time we build something that buries them." Later that evening, Riley sat in her apartment with the lights dimmed, a mug of chamomile tea growing cold in her hands. The legal verdict had given her clarity, but not comfort. She hadn't violated anything, but she also hadn't been fully free. Not from the past, not from the memories of what might have been borrowed unintentionally during years of survival and innovation born of desperation. She opened her laptop and wrote a journal entry, a habit she'd picked up from her therapist. The words spilled out unfiltered. "I didn't steal. I survived. I didn't copy. I evolved. The shame is not in what I built, but in how long I feared I wasn't allowed to build it." She saved the file and exhaled deeply, allowing herself to release the weight just a little. The next day, she returned to the lab with a renewed determination. She met with Diego and a few new interns, guiding them through thermal distribution simulations. She kept her answers clear, her feedback patient. And when one of them asked where her first big idea came from, she simply said, "Desperation and curiosity make a powerful combo, especially when no one expects anything from you." They laughed. She smiled. And the work continued, not in the shadows, but in the light. The Tech World interview was scheduled for 11 a.m., but Riley arrived 30 minutes early. It was a habit she'd never shaken from her military days, from her time drifting through job interviews where being 5 minutes late meant the difference between being seen or forgotten. She stood in the Tesla media wing, reviewing her notes for the 5th time, sipping lukewarm coffee from a biodegradable cup, her nerves wrapped tightly beneath an exterior of calm. The journalist, Dana Morales, arrived precisely on time, mid-40s, sharp-featured with expressive eyes, and a voice that carried the crisp confidence of someone used to cutting through noise. She wore a charcoal gray blazer, a minimalist smartwatch, and the kind of shoes that could handle walking interviews or red carpets with equal ease. She extended a hand and smiled. "I've wanted this conversation for a long time," Dana said. "Your name is everywhere, and every time I ask someone about the Morgan cell, they say, 'You have to meet Riley.'" Riley smiled, keeping her expression warm but measured. "I hope I live up to the hype." They moved into a private recording room, a clean, sound-dampened space with matte gray walls, a curved glass desk, and a camera team already setting up a 2-camera angle shot. Dana insisted they keep it conversational, no stiff scripting. Riley agreed, but inside, she reminded herself to tread carefully. The interview began with the basics, career highlights, design philosophy, the collaborative environment at Tesla. Riley spoke clearly, with an easy rhythm. She had learned how to speak in public without unraveling. But today, she knew the stakes were higher. Dana was known for drawing out deeply personal stories, beautifully written but revealing. "Let's talk about the battery," Dana said, leaning in. "You called it a solution born from necessity. What exactly do you mean by that?" Riley hesitated only briefly. Innovation doesn't always come from pristine labs and million-dollar grants. Sometimes it comes from necessity when you're sitting in a public library and all you have is a notebook, a basic calculator, and 3 hours of Wi-Fi. You start thinking differently when every page you use costs you something: space, time, hope. Dana nodded, visibly moved. You've spoken before about living in a van, about rebuilding your life. Do you think that experience shaped your engineering approach? Absolutely, Riley said. When you're unhoused, everything becomes a design problem. How to stay warm with limited power. How to structure storage efficiently in a confined space. How to improvise, adapt, survive. That sharpened my mind more than any textbook. I didn't have the luxury of thinking in theory. I had to think in terms of now. She paused, careful to redirect. But I want to be clear, it wasn't just about hardship. It was also about persistence. Every time I walked into a library, I chose to keep thinking, to keep building ideas, even when the world told me I wasn't allowed to. Dana's eyes glimmered. That kind of resilience, it's rare. People talk about bootstrapping, but this is something else entirely. Riley smiled softly. Resilience is like a muscle. You only know you have it when everything else is gone. Dana tapped her notes. Now, your background in engineering includes time in government contracts, yes? Riley's spine stiffened just slightly. Yes, I worked in various sectors early in my career. Mostly systems integration, testing, prototyping. Any specific focus? Riley kept her tone even. Most of it was covered under broad defense applications. My role was usually modular, collaborative. But the real growth happened after that. Once I left, I had to rely on raw creativity rather than military infrastructure. Dana, to her credit, noticed the boundary and respected it. She didn't push further. What I love about your story, Dana said instead, is that you didn't just innovate. You innovated in exile. You created something not in spite of hardship, but through it. Riley looked down for a moment, then back up. Sometimes the world closes every door you thought you had. But if you're lucky, you find a window cracked open. You reach for it. You build from there. The interview continued for nearly 2 hours. Riley talked about her mentorship of younger engineers like Diego, her deep admiration for Alex's leadership, and how Tesla had created an environment where second chances weren't just slogans, they were reality. They laughed together when Riley described using diner napkins as graph paper, and Dana nearly choked on her coffee hearing about Riley's makeshift lab bench made from an ironing board and a thrift store shelf. The story became not just one of engineering success, but of human reinvention. When the cameras stopped rolling, Dana leaned back in her chair and said quietly, "That was one of the most inspiring interviews I've ever conducted." Riley blinked. "Really?" Dana nodded. "It's not just about what you built. It's about how you built it, and who you chose to become in the process." Later that week, when the article dropped, it quickly went viral under the headline, "From Shelters to Silicon, the Rise of Riley Morgan." The opening paragraph read, "In a world obsessed with pedigree, Riley Morgan reminds us that innovation can come from the margins, that the next great idea might be scribbled in the dark by someone the world forgot. And yet, somehow, she remembered herself." Riley read the article 3 times, once as herself, once as the engineer she had become, and once as the woman who used to sleep in a van and dream of this very moment. She closed her laptop and walked to the window, staring out at the sun dipping low over Austin's skyline. The past was still there, still whispering, but it no longer held the pen. She did. It started innocently enough, an email sent to Riley Morgan's Tesla inbox from a Department of Energy liaison requesting a private meeting to discuss potential collaboration on renewable energy initiatives. The sender used polished language, sprinkled with patriotism and praise, but something about the tone felt off, too curated, too careful. It wasn't the kind of invitation extended to scientists. It was the kind dangled in front of assets. Riley hesitated, but replied out of courtesy. She agreed to meet at a neutral location, a downtown federal building near the Capitol View corridor, late afternoon, broad daylight. If they were playing games, she wouldn't be caught alone in shadows. When she arrived, she was ushered to a minimalist conference room where, to her surprise, Senator Bradley Kingston himself was already seated, nursing a glass of water, like it was aged whiskey. He stood when she entered, smiling that same disarming smile that had made her skin crawl weeks earlier at the Tesla showcase. "Ms. Morgan," he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." "I was told this was about research funding," Riley said, remaining standing. "Not politics." "Everything is politics," Kingston replied, folding his hands. "You've become quite the symbol lately. TechWorld, Tesla, keynote addresses. You've rebranded yourself very nicely." "I didn't rebrand anything," she said. "I rebuilt." He gave a performative nod, as if acknowledging a chess move that annoyed him. "The Department of Energy is forming a new advisory committee for advanced battery systems. You'd be perfect. Prestige, compensation, national security access. We could fast-track clearance, 6 figures monthly, and all you need to do is lend your expertise." Riley narrowed her eyes. "And if I say no?" Kingston's expression didn't shift. "Then I worry that old questions might resurface. Not from me, of course, but from others. Certain military advisors are still interested in Falcon Crest. It would be unfortunate if the DOJ were prompted to explore misappropriation angles. Even if they lead nowhere, the process itself could tarnish what you've built." Riley's stomach turned, but she kept her posture steady. "This isn't an offer," she said. "It's extortion." Kingston smiled again, polite and poisonous. "I prefer the term strategic alignment." Riley leaned across the table, locking eyes with him. "You want to borrow my name to whitewash a program you abandoned and now want to resurrect for political gain. You think a woman who survived homelessness and built a legacy from nothing will fold because you dangle a paycheck and threaten shadows? You picked the wrong target, Senator." For a brief moment, the practiced calm in his eyes flickered. Then he stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "You're a proud woman, Ms. Morgan. I respect that. I only hope it doesn't cost you." Riley didn't wait for him to leave. She walked out without looking back, heart racing, every step echoing with adrenaline and fury. Back at Tesla, she didn't go to her apartment or the lab. She went straight to Elon's office. He was alone, reviewing product rollout data on a triple-screen array, but looked up the moment she entered. Her face told him everything before she spoke. "Kingston came back," she said, closing the door behind her. "What did he want?" "He offered me a consulting role with the Department of Energy. Ridiculous money. Security clearances. He's trying to pull me into something tied to Falcon Crest or whatever reboot they're cooking up." Elon's expression darkened. "He threatened me," she added, softly, but it was clear. "Refuse, and they'll stir legal trouble, even if it's baseless." Elon stood and crossed the room. "You recorded it?" "No, I wasn't prepared, but I documented everything after. Every word. He's using political leverage. I don't think he cares about the battery. I think he cares about optics and control." Elon paced silently for a few seconds, then turned back toward her. "I want a meeting with senior leadership," he said. "Tonight." Within 2 hours, Tesla's core executive circle gathered in a secure boardroom. Alex Kodler, the head of legal, director of communications, and VP of government affairs. Riley sat among them, calm but unflinching. Elon stood at the head of the table, hands in pockets, voice measured but sharp. "Senator Kingston has made multiple covert attempts to intimidate one of our top engineers," he said. "He's leveraging a defunct military project to create political pressure. We can't allow this kind of coercion to compromise Tesla's integrity or Riley's." The head of legal nodded. "Technically, we're in the clear. There's no direct evidence of wrongdoing, but we need to control the narrative before they do." The VP of Communications spoke next. "What's our strategy? Silence or counterplay?" Elon turned to Riley. "You okay going public if we have to?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "If they try to weaponize my past, I'll use the truth." Alex leaned forward. "Then let's hit first. A white paper on the origin of the Morgan cell. Internal documentation. Public timeline. No mention of Falcon Crest. But we highlight transparency and originality. We position Riley's journey as a story of intellectual rebirth, not some continuation of a dusty Pentagon file." The head of legal added, "And if Kingston escalates, we're ready with whistleblower protections. We've already got allies in the Senate who despise him." Elon nodded, satisfied. "We don't fold. We focus forward." That night, Riley returned home exhausted but not broken. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window, staring out at the glowing city. She knew what was coming wouldn't be easy. Power never let go without a fight. But she also knew something else. She wasn't alone anymore. And this time, the system that once overlooked her was standing beside her. It was a move so bold that even Tesla's most seasoned legal advisors paused before answering. "Open source the Morgan cell," one of them repeated, blinking. "You mean give away the patent?" Elon Musk stood at the head of the executive conference room, arms crossed, gaze unwavering. "No," he said simply. "I mean release it. Make the core design public. Anyone can build it, improve it, use it. No strings." The room went quiet. Riley sat 2 seats to his left, watching the ripple of surprise spread across the leadership team like a low-voltage current. Alex Kodler leaned back in his chair, lips pursed, then slowly nodded. "It would kill any attempt to classify the technology under military jurisdiction," he said. "If the design is everywhere, no one can claim exclusive rights. Not even the government." "Exactly," Elon said. "We neutralize the threat by democratizing the innovation. And it's aligned with Tesla's mission: accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, not profit from bottlenecking it." The head of legal raised a cautious hand. "This will send shockwaves through the industry. And there are financial consequences. Competitors will replicate it. Fast." Elon gave a dry smile. "Then they'll be improving the world faster than we could alone. That's the point." All eyes shifted to Riley. This was her design, her journey, her story, and now she was being asked, empowered, to give it away. She took a deep breath and said, "Let it go." The room fell silent again, but this time with reverence. "It was never about ownership," she continued. "It was about impact. I designed it because I needed a way to survive. It grew because others believed in it. And now it can do what it was always meant to: outlive me." The decision was unanimous. Within 24 hours, Tesla's legal team finalized the documentation. The announcement went live via press release, an open letter signed by Elon Musk and Riley Morgan, published across every major tech, energy, and environmental platform. Today, we release the Morgan Cell core design to the public. It belongs not to one company or one person, but to the future. Use it, build with it, make it better, and may it always serve the planet before it serves profit. The internet exploded. News anchors called it unprecedented. Environmental activists wept on live streams. Solar firms and EV startups scrambled to download the design. Forums and subreddits erupted with engineers reverse engineering the schematics, already discussing improvements and adaptations. One clip from CNN went viral. For the first time, a company has turned down billions to hand the keys to the clean energy revolution to the world. And leading the charge, a formerly homeless veteran with a battered notebook and the heart of a revolutionary. Riley watched it all from her apartment, alone, coffee in hand, her phone buzzing endlessly with texts and calls. But the real moment came not from a screen. It came the next morning when she visited a small public library on the east side of Austin. It was one of the libraries where she had spent countless hours scribbling in margins, hiding in plain sight, and piecing together the earliest fragments of the Morgan cell. She walked in quietly, nodding to the librarian, who recognized her with a stunned smile. "I used to sit right there," Riley said, pointing to a corner desk next to a broken power outlet. "Back then, I didn't know what I was building." She pulled a printed copy of the open-source design from her tote bag, bound simply in a clear folder, and handed it to the librarian. "I want this added to your archive," she said. "Let kids know it's possible." Outside, a group of engineering students from UT Austin approached her with cautious excitement. "Ms. Morgan," one of them said, "we're building a solar drone using your cell. We'd love to show you." Riley laughed. "You just made my week." The release of the Morgan cell sparked a global domino effect. In India, a rural electric co-op used the design to create affordable home battery packs. In Nairobi, a group of university students launched a microgrid using recycled components and Morgan cell modules. In Brazil, a nonprofit deployed portable medical fridges to remote Amazon communities, finally able to store vaccines safely off-grid. Within weeks, the design had been translated into over 30 languages, and not 1 cent was charged. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the Department of Energy's quiet campaign to classify the design under national security restrictions collapsed in real time. Senator Kingston's office went silent. The threat was dead, defused by transparency. One Tesla exec joked, "They tried to turn it into a weapon, and we turned it into a Wikipedia page." For Riley, the decision to open source the Morgan cell wasn't just a strategic move. It was a personal exorcism. The ghosts of Falcon Crest no longer held weight. The whispers of doubt and the weight of institutional threats had been burned away by one simple truth: they can't control what belongs to everyone. That night, Elon sent her a single-line email. "History just changed. Sleep well." She did, for the first time in a very, very long time. The open-source release of the Morgan cell landed like a thunderclap in Washington. Headlines multiplied. Think pieces flooded tech blogs, policy journals, and social media feeds. Environmental leaders hailed it as a masterstroke. Even longtime Tesla skeptics conceded. The decision was selfless, strategic, and brilliant. Senator Bradley Kingston, once the silent predator lurking in the margins of Riley's new life, faded quietly into the background. His office issued a vague statement praising public-private collaboration for energy innovation, but made no further mention of Riley, the Morgan cell, or any related Department of Energy initiatives. Behind closed doors, analysts noted that Kingston had miscalculated. He had tried to leverage control over a proprietary design, and in doing so, underestimated the very force that now protected Riley: transparency. Tesla's legal and communications teams, now operating like synchronized gears in a high-performance machine, had made it clear any further threats would be met not just with litigation, but with public illumination. And Senator Kingston, a career politician with more skeletons than sponsors, didn't need that kind of heat. Just like that, the ghost receded. And Riley Morgan, no longer hunted, could finally build again, but this time, not just for herself. The Morgan cell entered full production by the end of the quarter. Assembly lines adapted quickly. The design's efficiency wasn't just technical, it was humane. It used fewer rare materials, required less cooling infrastructure, and was modular enough to be assembled in various forms globally. From solar storage walls to microgrids and EV units, the Morgan cell was becoming what Riley always dreamed it could be: adaptable, scalable, democratic. But what surprised her most wasn't the tech adoption. It was the personal requests. Emails began arriving from nonprofit groups, city councils, and shelters across the country. They asked if Riley would be willing to speak, to mentor, to advise on programs that merge technology with workforce rehabilitation. It got her thinking. One Thursday morning, she brought her idea to Alex Kodler over coffee on the Tesla campus patio, where the buzz of engineers mingled with birdsong. "I want to start a training initiative," Riley said, "for veterans, especially the unhoused. We train them on battery tech, real skills, wiring, safety, diagnostics. Give them something that belongs to them, a path forward." Alex stirred his coffee slowly, processing. "You mean like a Tesla-backed academy?" "No," Riley said. "A partnership. I'll lead it. Tesla can support with tools, space, maybe even jobs after. But this has to be mine, like the notebook was mine. I want it to reach the people who've been forgotten, like I was." Alex smiled. "I know a guy who might be interested." 3 days later, she pitched the idea to Elon Musk. He listened quietly, leaning against the wall of his office with a bottle of mineral water in one hand and a notepad in the other. When she finished, he only asked one question. "What do you want to call it?" She paused. "Project Signal." He nodded. "Let's build it." The following month, a converted section of Tesla's Austin campus was reborn. What had once been a seldom-used auxiliary warehouse was transformed into a clean, modern technical training center. Workbenches were arranged in rows, soldering kits stacked neatly beside safety gloves and protective eyewear. Riley had insisted on tactile learning, no endless lectures or virtual modules. Every student would touch the work, feel the current, understand the risk and reward of building something that mattered. Project Signal launched with a cohort of 15 veterans. Some arrived wary, shoulders tense, eyes darting the way Riley's once had when she entered a room full of people who seemed to have it all together. Others walked in already scanning the walls for exits, silently calculating how long they could survive if things went wrong again. But Riley greeted them all the same way. No speeches, no pity, just a handshake, a smile, and a pair of gloves. "You belong here," she told each of them. "We start with wires and end with power. Let's get to work." The first few weeks were slow. Some struggled with the terminology. Others hadn't held a soldering iron in years, if ever. One man named Deshaun, a former Navy electrician, quietly wept during lunch break on day 4. When Riley asked why, he said, "I forgot what it felt like to be useful." By week 6, they were building full-scale modules, miniature battery packs based on the Morgan cell core. The classroom became a sanctuary of clattering tools and focused silence. Riley moved between students like a conductor, correcting grip positions, nodding in approval, cracking jokes just dry enough to get a laugh, and keep the air light. And one night, as she locked up the workshop after everyone had gone, she found a note tucked under a voltmeter. "You didn't just give us training. You gave us signal, and we're tuning in." Her throat tightened. She placed the note in her pocket and didn't tell anyone about it. Some things she'd learned were sacred enough to keep close. By the end of the first cycle, 13 of the 15 students had completed the full course. 8 had already accepted job offers, 4 from Tesla, others from local green tech startups that had quietly followed the program's progress. The 2 who didn't finish, Riley stayed in contact with them too. They weren't dropouts. They were detouring. Project Signal became more than classroom. It became a movement. And for Riley Morgan, it was a way of honoring the path she'd walked by lighting it for those who were still trying to find it. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the canopy of live oaks and flowering crepe myrtles, casting golden shadows over the stone path that wound its way through the Austin Botanical Gardens. Guests in light linen suits and flowing summer dresses sat quietly in rows of white chairs, the air filled with the subtle scent of honeysuckle and jasmine. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above, as if nature itself had paused to witness the moment. And at the center of it all, Riley Morgan stood in a simple, elegant navy dress, her arm linked with her son's. Gabriel, in a tailored light gray suit with a navy boutonniere to match his mother's dress, looked both calm and euphoric. He glanced at Riley with a nervous smile, then turned back toward the arbor ahead where Liam waited, hands clasped tightly, eyes glistening. As the first chords of the acoustic guitar version of "Here Comes the Sun" floated through the garden, Riley took a breath. And they walked. With every step, her heels softly crunching gravel beneath the stone slabs, her mind reached backward, unspooling memory after memory, like film running in reverse. She thought of the night under the bridge near East Riverside, the wind biting through her jacket, the distant sirens, the ache in her stomach, not just from hunger, but from hopelessness. She'd been alone, wrapped in silence, with only her notebook for company. That night, she had stared at a napkin sketch of a thermal loop and wondered if it would die with her, unnoticed. She thought of the first time she met Elon, rain-soaked and half-disbelieving, and the coffee at the Lone Fork that changed everything. She thought of the glass conference room where Alex Kodler had said, without hesitation, "You belong here." She thought of her old van, of waiting in line at a shelter, of a worn tire she couldn't afford to replace, of public libraries that gave her power outlets and dignity. And now here she was, the mother of the groom, walking with her son toward the life he'd built, toward joy, commitment, and love. Gabriel gave her hand a small squeeze as they reached the end of the aisle. "You okay?" he whispered. Riley smiled, eyes shining. "More than okay." She kissed his cheek and placed his hand in Liam's. Then she stepped back, taking her seat in the front row as the officiant welcomed everyone to the ceremony. The words blurred slightly, something about love, resilience, partnership, but Riley's mind wandered again, not out of distraction, but because her heart was full to the brim. After the ceremony, the garden erupted with applause and laughter as the newlyweds kissed and raised their joined hands in triumph. Gabriel and Liam were surrounded by hugs, petals tossed into the air, and the flashing of cameras capturing joy from every angle. Later, at the open-air reception under a string of Edison bulbs, Riley stood near the edge of the dance floor with a glass of sparkling cider in hand. The evening sky had dimmed to a soft twilight, and fireflies blinked lazily along the garden's edge. She watched as Gabriel twirled Liam beneath a glowing archway, their smiles wide, their movements light and unburdened. Alex Kodler joined her, holding a glass of wine. "You clean up well," he said. She laughed softly. "Don't let it fool you. I still have grease under my nails from yesterday's training session." "I wouldn't expect anything less." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the celebration unfold. "You ever think this would be your life?" Alex asked gently. "Every day," she replied, "and also never." He nodded, understanding the paradox. Elon arrived a few minutes later, dressed less formally than everyone else, black blazer, no tie, and sneakers, but no one minded. He handed Riley a folded note. "You might want to read this," he said with a sly smile. She opened it. Inside was a simple message, handwritten in Elon's unmistakable scrawl. "Morgan Cell version 3.2 launches in 6 weeks. Global partnerships incoming. You're on every patent and every story. Just thought you should know." Riley folded the note carefully, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. "I never thanked you," she said. "For what?" "For believing me. Back when I wasn't sure I was allowed to believe in myself." Elon shrugged. "You didn't need me. You just needed the right frequency. You were already broadcasting." Before he could disappear into the crowd again, as he often did, Riley caught him by the elbow. "I'm starting a second cohort of Project Signal," she said. 20 vets this time, and we're expanding into solar integration." Elon's grin widened. "Now that's a signal worth boosting." As the evening rolled on, Riley found herself dancing, first with Alex, then with Gabriel, then with one of her students from a first cohort who had shown up in a borrowed suit just to say thank you. The stars came out slowly, as if reluctant to compete with the lanterns and laughter. And when Riley finally sat down alone for a moment beneath the arbor where her son had married the man he loved, she looked up at the night sky and whispered a quiet thought. It was never about one invention. It was about permission, to try, to fail, to rise. From the margins, she had redrawn her place in the world. And now, in the glow of soft music and family, she finally felt what had eluded her for years, not just peace, but home. Riley Morgan's world no longer moved at the chaotic pace of survival. It moved with intention now, slow where it mattered, fast where it counted. Every morning, she arrived at the Tesla facility just after sunrise, coffee in hand, boots laced tight, her work badge clipped loosely to the collar of her faded utility jacket. It was the same rhythm she'd kept from the early days, before the Morgan Cell changed everything, before the spotlight, before the interviews, before the accolades. Some parts of her hadn't changed. She still kept her original engineering notebook tucked inside her desk drawer, its cover soft and creased, the duct tape along the spine worn, but unbroken. She didn't look at it often, but she liked knowing it was there. Her days were now divided between technical collaboration and mentorship. Most mornings were filled with design reviews, testing protocols, and integration updates. She remained a key contributor in the refinement of the Morgan Cell. Its third iteration had just launched with even greater thermal regulation and materials sustainability. Riley, ever the tinkerer, never believed the design was finished. It simply evolved. But what she had grown to value even more were the afternoons. That was when the younger engineers came. Diego, once nervous and self-doubting, had flourished under her guidance. Now, in his second year at Tesla, he led his own team, developing a modular energy distribution system based on Riley's original schematics. They often met in the design bay, papers spread out between them, arguing over flow rates or density caps, sometimes disagreeing, but always respecting. "I'm going to beat your efficiency record," Diego teased one day, holding up a prototype graph. "You can try," Riley replied with a grin. "But if you do, I'll just take credit for teaching you." She mentored others too: Julia, a materials scientist fresh out of grad school, and Raymond, a former diesel mechanic who had retrained in the Signal program and showed a natural talent for system diagnostics. She encouraged them all the same way, by giving them room to fail, by listening more than she spoke, and by reminding them that brilliance didn't always wear a lab coat or speak in academic jargon. Yet for all the progress, not every day was easy. There were mornings when Riley would wake with a tightness in her chest she couldn't name. Nights when dreams turned to flashbacks of helicopters slicing the sky, of explosions reverberating through sand, of the quiet panic that followed days without direction. Her PTSD never left. It lived beside her like a shadow, sometimes quiet, sometimes heavy. But what had changed was this: she didn't face it alone. Tesla's mental health team, strengthened in part because of Riley's advocacy, had built a robust support system. Therapy wasn't a luxury, it was an expectation. Group sessions, trauma-informed coaching, and a growing peer support network had made vulnerability a professional strength. Riley became an unofficial figurehead for the initiative. She spoke often to new hires, especially veterans transitioning from service. She talked about more than batteries. She talked about the nights that didn't make the papers, the mistakes she made, the guilt, the exhaustion, the healing. In one session, after a quiet Marine named Eli shared his struggle with panic attacks in team meetings, Riley leaned forward and said softly, "You're not broken. You're just rewiring. And some of the best circuits in the world are built from salvage." He cried. She did too. No one pretended otherwise. Outside the lab, Riley found solace in small routines. She tended to a rooftop garden above her apartment. Her tomatoes had taken surprisingly well to the Texas sun. She kept in touch with Gabriel and Liam, now enjoying their first year of marriage. Sunday dinners had become a new tradition, where the conversation bounced between software updates and vacation plans, and the only tension came from a heated board game or a slightly overcooked lasagna. On quieter nights, she walked by the river trail alone, earbuds in, music low, watching the lights of the city shimmer on the water. She didn't try to forget the past anymore. Instead, she let it walk beside her, like an old scar that reminded her not of pain, but of strength. One evening, as she returned to her apartment, she noticed a box on her doorstep. Inside was a framed certificate from the Department of Veterans Affairs, an official recognition of her contributions to veteran advocacy, technical innovation, and public service. Beneath her name, in bold black letters, it read, "Service continues in many forms." She hung it quietly in her living room, beside a photo from Gabriel's wedding. That night, she called Diego. "Next week," she said, "we're going to start building that portable battery prototype you mentioned. The one for disaster relief shelters." "You're serious?" he asked. "As a power outage in August," she said, "we'll work nights, just like the old days." She ended the call, smiling. Riley Morgan hadn't arrived at perfection. There were still battles, still low days, still moments of doubt. But now, when the darkness came, it found her not crouched beneath it, but standing firmly in the light of everything she had built, and everything she continued to share. Her name wasn't just on patents anymore. It was on people. The first time Riley Morgan saw the new Project Signal facility in San Diego, she had to blink twice. A part of her still couldn't believe it existed, let alone that it bore her name. The glass-paneled building, nestled near the city's old naval shipyards, stood as a symbol of transformation. Where rusted metal and forgotten infrastructure once lined the coast, a modern technical training center now buzzed with life. Ex-service members in gray work jackets soldering battery modules, others gathered around 3D printers, and some simply sitting in classrooms learning the language of circuitry. The program had grown faster than anyone anticipated. After the pilot in Austin had exceeded every expectation, 95% completion, high job placement, zero attrition, other cities began calling. Veterans groups, city councils, private donors, even competitors of Tesla wanted to know how to replicate it. Riley, never one to chase the spotlight, was hesitant at first. But with Elon's quiet nod and Alex Koteler's logistical precision, Project Signal expanded, first to San Diego, then to Atlanta, and finally to Detroit. Each location tailored the program to local needs, but the core remained untouched: respect, hands-on learning, and unwavering belief in potential. Riley traveled to each new site during its launch. She met the instructors personally, held office hours for the students, and always shared her story on day one. Not the polished, magazine cover version, but the real one. The one with the bridge, the van, the notebook, because she didn't want to be remembered as the woman who rose above. She wanted to be understood as the woman who stayed in it, who fought to turn scars into blueprints. In Atlanta, she stood in front of a class of 18 new trainees, many of them quiet, some skeptical, most carrying invisible weight. She wore jeans and a Tesla work shirt, sleeves rolled past her elbows, her badge clipped casually at her hip. "I'm not here to save anyone," she said. "That's your job. What I am here to do is tell you the truth. No one knows what you're capable of, not even you, until you're given space to try." One man in the back nodded slowly, and she knew right then they were listening. Meanwhile, invitations to speak at conferences started to arrive with increasing frequency. Energy summits, veterans advocacy panels, engineering expos. At first, she declined most of them. She didn't like the stage, the formality, or the perception that she had somehow made it while others still struggled. But Diego finally pulled her aside one day and said, "If you don't go up there, someone else will tell your story for you." So she went. And when she spoke, she didn't sound like a CEO or a war hero. She sounded like herself, clear, grounded, and real. At the Global Clean Tech Forum in Seattle, she stood on a wide circular stage, the Tesla logo shining faintly behind her, and addressed an audience of thousands. "I'm not here because I was rescued," she said. "I'm here because I was given a chance to build. And because I had a notebook no one cared about until someone listened." Innovation isn't just born in research labs. Sometimes it's born in shelters, on park benches, or in the back of a van when the rain won't let you sleep. The room was silent. A few attendees wiped tears from their cheeks. Afterward, a young woman approached her backstage, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly. She'd just left the Navy and was trying to get into engineering school, but had been turned down 3 times. "I didn't think people like me made it in this field," she said. Riley placed a hand on her shoulder. "We do now." Back in Austin, her days remained as rooted as ever. She still walked the lab floors, still reviewed student designs, still held one-on-one sessions with veterans unsure if they deserved to be there. Her office was small by choice and still contained the same framed photo of Gabriel's wedding and the original letter from Elon about the Morgan Cell's open-source launch. And still, every week, she met with her therapist, because the work never stopped, neither the healing nor the building. One Friday afternoon, as she was leaving the Signal facility, she passed by a group of new students taking a break on the loading dock. They were joking about who had the worst coffee preferences when one of them, a tall, quiet man in his 40s named Marcus, called out to her. "Hey Morgan," he said, "do you ever just pause? Look at all this and think, damn, this is real." Riley smiled. Every single day. They laughed, and someone offered her a sip of terrible vending machine coffee. She declined, but stayed anyway, sitting on the concrete with them, trading old military stories, talking about bad bosses and broken power tools. For a moment, there was no hierarchy, just shared understanding. Later that night, back at her apartment, she opened a new notebook, not to sketch a design, but to begin writing down the names of every student who had come through Project Signal. Not numbers, not metrics, names, because to Riley Morgan, legacy wasn't built in patents or applause. It was built one name at a time, written not in ink, but in impact. The rooftop was quiet, the way rooftops always are when the city begins to slow down, but never truly sleeps. Riley Morgan stood barefoot on the wooden deck just outside her apartment, a worn ceramic mug cradled in both hands, steam curling upward into the warm Texas night. Below her, Austin unfolded in all directions, a patchwork of glowing windows, distant traffic, and late-night hums that blended into a steady, comforting drone. This was her favorite hour, after the calls had ended, after the news alerts had gone silent, after the last student had left the Signal Lab for the night, and the world, for just a while, asked nothing more of her. She sipped slowly and looked out over the skyline, eyes drawn to the curve of the river, the silhouetted cranes reshaping the city in slow, deliberate movements. It had been exactly 3 years since the flat tire. She hadn't marked it on the calendar, but somehow her body had remembered. The anniversary lived in her bones. It hadn't rained that night the same way it was raining now. Back then, the drops had been sharper, colder, full of warning. The kind of rain that made people pull their jackets tight and ignore anything that wasn't already in their rearview mirror. And yet one person had stopped. One person hadn't just seen a broken-down van or a woman with smudged hands and a wary expression. Elon had seen something. She still didn't know exactly what. Maybe not even he had known. But it had been enough. Enough to invite her to coffee. Enough to ask what she was working on. Enough to care. The Morgan cell changed her career, yes. It changed the way energy was stored, distributed, and imagined. But it wasn't the most important thing that had come from that rainy night. The real breakthrough had been empathy. No tech conference would ever print that on a brochure. No white paper would frame it as innovation. But it was. Empathy was the engine behind every door that opened since. It was what rewired her own belief in herself. It was what built Project Signal, what filled classrooms in Austin, San Diego, Atlanta, and Detroit with veterans who had once been overlooked and were now building batteries, solar systems, and second chances. She walked to the edge of the rooftop, the lights of the city reflected faintly in her eyes. From here, she could almost trace her journey through the neighborhoods, past the shelter where she'd waited for a sandwich, the library that gave her a warm corner to think, the diner where she'd first scribbled equations for the cooling loop that would one day power a revolution. And she thought about everyone who had touched that path. Gabriel, now thriving and still calling every Sunday. Diego, who just got promoted and sent her a thank you note, so honest it made her cry, in the Tesla break room. Alex, who still challenged her daily and occasionally beat her at chess. Even Senator Kingston, in his own way, a reminder of how far the world still had to go. The rooftop garden she'd built along the edge was growing again. She crouched beside the raised beds and ran her fingers along the smooth skin of a ripening tomato. Next to it, lavender brushed gently in the breeze. She had never thought herself a gardener, but there was something poetic in it, taking care of things that only asked for time, light, and patience. She stood again, letting the wind lift the edges of her shirt. Somewhere below, a street musician played a slow acoustic version of Hallelujah. The notes floated upward, imperfect but beautiful. Inside, on her coffee table, were folders marked with new partnerships, a branch of Project Signal proposed for the Philippines, another for Brazil. She hadn't said yes to either yet. She needed to visit them herself, to walk the streets, talk to the people, look someone in the eye, and decide if it felt right. That was the standard now. Do they see people, or just systems? Because that was the line, the real one. You could train anyone to solder, to calculate voltage, to install solar arrays. But to teach someone that they mattered, that was the current that made everything work. That was the unspoken power source, the invisible grid behind it all. Riley sat down on a cushioned bench, legs crossed, mug resting on her knee. A single moth circled the rooftop light. A motorcycle rumbled a few blocks away. Life continued, and so would she. She didn't want fame. Never had. What she wanted was what she now had: quiet dignity, a roof, a role, a ripple effect. And she wanted to make sure others could have it too. Because somewhere out there tonight, another person like her was standing in the rain. Maybe holding a notebook. Maybe holding nothing at all but breath and hope. And they needed someone who saw potential instead of a problem. That's what she'd learned. Empathy doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to arrive on time. And now, if you're still here watching this video, here's something simple I'd love for you to do. Drop the name of your city in the comments. Just that. No pressure. No pitch. Just your signal. Why? Because somewhere in this story, maybe something resonated. And by sharing where you're from, you're reminding someone else, maybe someone who really needs it, that they're not alone out there. And hey, if a flat tire can change a life, maybe your comment can too. Go ahead. I'll be reading them.